start recording. There we go. Okay, speaking of recorded lectures, so what I've been typically doing is recording the lectures in Blackboard and then uploading those to YouTube and then linking those YouTube videos, and that allows me to use the same video across multiple classes. I'm going to keep doing that. The problem I'm having is that one of my lectures from last week was taken down for copyright reasons. So instead of making those videos public, I'm going to set them as unlisted from now on. So to be able to access those, you'll have to go into Blackboard and click on the links for them. You're not going to be able to just search for it on YouTube or look at the channel and find it. Okay, so you will have to actually click on those links from Blackboard. And if you're not sure where those are, they're under course materials and lecture videos. So anytime you miss a lecture, you can go back and watch that video later if you need to. Next, first off, assignments. You have 3 assignments due this Friday this week, plus an exam this week. So you have the last 2 of the multiple choice assignments and the second listening assignment are all due on Friday, and you will have an exam on Friday. If you come in person, you'll be able to come and take that exam in person. And of course, if you're doing it online, you'll have through Monday morning at 8 a.m. to get that done. Okay. Now that we have had 3 exams, we should be fairly familiar with the process for those exams and how to take those. So I really don't expect to see a lot of people needing to go back in and take those later. And I want to remind you that you can only, yes, I will allow you to take an exam up to a week late, but I'll only allow you to do that 3 times. Okay, because beyond that, it becomes kind of obvious that you're just wanting to have a few extra days to study and get ready for the exam. So you've got to be willing to take that. So if you've taken all of the exams late so far, that's it. That was your chance. Now you've got to make sure you get them done on time. Okay, so make sure that you're doing that. It'll open up on Friday morning, and it'll be available all the way until Monday morning. So anytime between Friday and 8 a.m. on Monday morning, you can take the exam. I strongly suggest that you don't wait until 7 a.m. on Monday to take the exam. I've had a couple of people do that, and I've gotten messages about having internet issues or something, so they weren't able to get it turned in. And I'm sorry, if you waited until 7 o'clock in the morning to take the exam, that's a possibility. So I would suggest taking it earlier so that you don't run into those issues. Okay. Also, regarding late work and retaking stuff late, I am certainly willing to let you do that, but I do want to remind you that my general policy is that during the week, I will usually get back with you within 24 hours. If you email me during the week anytime, I'm going to get back to you within a day, usually within a few hours. If you email me, especially during the day, if you email me between 8 a.m. and 4 or 5 p.m. any given day, I'm going to get back with you pretty quickly, at least within 24 hours. But if you email me on a weekend, it's going to be Monday morning before I get back to you. Okay, I do have a life outside of UACCM, believe it or not, and Saturday is really my only day off throughout the week, so I usually spend all day Saturday with my family, and Sunday I work at a church, so I'm usually doing my other job on Sunday and then having family time on Sunday afternoon with my extended family. So the chances of you getting an email back from me on a Saturday or Sunday are pretty slim, and I think that's pretty reasonable. I'm sure I'm not the only one of your teachers that has that policy. Okay, we do have lives, and I don't get paid enough to sit with my phone and answer emails all day long instead of spending time with my daughter that I hardly ever get to see. So just be aware of that. Also, make sure that you're trying to take care of stuff in a timely fashion whenever you're making up late work. Try not to wait until the last minute to get things done. And I'll usually be a lot more lenient with you if you are. Okay, so get that stuff taken care of. Remember that you do have those performance assessments coming up. We're getting down to the wire on those. We got about a month, a little over a month before those are due, about 5 weeks. So again, try to get those taken care of. If you've forgotten what I'm talking about, you have no idea what those performance assessments are, go back to under course materials in Blackboard and look in the folder performance assessments. There's a video explaining what the performance assessments are, and there is instructions and all that stuff laid out there for you. Some of you have already done the performance assessments and you're good to go, and that's great. But many of you have not done those yet, and I really encourage you to try to get those taken care of as quickly as possible. Yes?
If we turn those in before the deadline, do we get any kind of feedback on them?
Yes. If you'll either just get your 100. If you get 100 points, then you're fine. You don't have to worry about them. But if you turn it in before the deadline and there's a mistake with it, or there's something you could do better, then I'll let you know, and you'll have a chance to take that to do it again. Okay. And that applies to about a week before the deadline. If you turn them in the last week before they do, that's when I'm going to get 150 people turning them in at once. So I'm probably not going to be able to send you a lot of feedback in that case. But if you get them turned in, before about November 15th or so, then you'll get feedback from me. Yes.
So I have a question about about us retaking the assignments. What do you usually do with the attempts? You usually just take the one with the highest grade.
Yes.
Put in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's usually automatic. So unless you turn it in after I've already converted those blank grades to zeros, then it'll automatically update. If you wait until I've already converted them to zeros, then I do have to go back in and do it manually, but I will take the highest attempts. Yeah, anything that's multiple attempts, I'll always give you the highest graded attempt on it. And if you look at something and that's not the case, it hasn't worked out that way, shoot me an email and I'll fix it. There are mistakes that get made, sometimes from Blackboard's end, sometimes just for me because I am a human. I do make mistakes occasionally, believe it or not. Okay, so I want to start today. We're going to talk about Mozart a little bit today, and hopefully you've read the chapter and done some of these assignments, so you kind of have an idea of what's going on here. We'll do a kind of a brief biography here. And then I want to spend most of the period today we'll be listening to his music and trying to kind of get an understanding of Mozart and his personality. I've also got a video clip or two to play for you. So Mozart was born in 1756 in Salzburg, Austria. His father was a court musician. Not a terribly well-known one, but pretty notable in his own right. You can find examples of compositions by Leopold Mozart, who was his father. And as a young child, his father encouraged him to begin playing music, and he did from a very early age, and he exhibited an astounding talent from a pretty early age. So between having a natural talent for it anyway, and also being encouraged and pushed by his father, he quickly became what we call a child prodigy. By the time he was 6 years old, he could play the harpsichord, he could play the violin, he could improvise fugues in the style of Bach, and he could read and write music perfectly at first sight. And pretty quickly after that, he gained the ability to be able to transcribe music upon a first hearing. So he could hear somebody play something and could immediately copy it back to them or write it down. And that's actually how he composed a lot of his music. He would sit down at the piano and improvise for a while, and then he would go and write down what he had improvised, which is a pretty brilliant way of composing, but it is not too far off from the way a lot of composers compose these days. Nowadays, we actually have tools to help us with that. I can plug my computer into my iPad or into my computer, or plug my keyboard into my iPad or my computer and sit down and play, and it'll record stuff out for me, and then I can go in and make edits and make changes and figure out what I'm doing. But Mozart didn't have to do that. He didn't have to record it. He didn't have to have somebody transcribing it out for him. He could just sit down and play for 5 or 10 minutes and then go and remember everything he just played. Pretty brilliant stuff.
So he was basically popular, like during his time of music.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit. And I mentioned that with the piece that we just listened to, that most of Mozart's music was very popular for the time. It was considered to be, it was similar to the pop music of today. So as he, from an early age, from about 6 to 16 or so, he toured around Europe. His father took him around, kind of showing him off as this child prodigy. And he played for all of the major emperors and kings of the various countries around Europe. He played for the aristocracy and all of the great noble families and won a lot of praise and fame during that time. And then later on, after in his later teenage years, he started becoming a composer and a professional musician in his own right. And he started being paid to write music. So first, he tried as a court musician in Salzburg, and it was not a good position for him. He did not get along very well with the patron, the person that he worked for. He ended up having a lot of arguments with him. And part of that was because of his personality. So he had, he didn't really have much of a childhood as far as the normal stuff that kids do. He was out on tour for his entire childhood and was being, taken care of by his father and his mother, and was overly spoiled by them by a long shot. And was kind of used to getting his way, used to getting whatever he wanted, and not really having to deal with other people criticizing him or expecting him to do other things. So working as a court musician, he didn't have that kind of personality for it. He wanted to do things his way, and he felt like he was smarter than everybody else around him, so he should be able to do it his way. Kind of similar to if you've ever watched The Big Bang Theory and you think about like how Sheldon on The Big Bang Theory, works with his, not just his roommates, but also with his employers. He gets fired several times throughout the run of that show because he just believes that he's smarter than everybody else. And Mozart was definitely in that same vein. And he was very immature. He was very childlike. And he had a habit of being kind of obscene and over the top. He, even into his late teens and early 20s, acted like what we would consider today probably a junior high kid. He would chase girls around and flirt with them in a very childlike manner, which at that time, especially in the nobility and in the aristocracy, was really not accepted. There was a certain amount of decorum that you were supposed to have, and Mozart never really exhibited that. So he left the court by the time he was in his early 20s and went to Vienna as a freelance musician, and was very successful early on, and that was partially because the Emperor of Austria, who lived in Vienna, was a big fan of his music, had met him early on, and was a huge fan. He never really officially worked for him, but the Emperor did commission some music from him and would attend his concerts and made sure that he was successful early on. But that success eventually wore off a little bit. The novelty of Mozart being who he was kind of wore off, and he lost some of that charm. As he got older, people expected him to act more like an adult composer, and he just didn't. He was still very childlike and immature. So they got tired of his personality, but his music also shifted. Mozart himself got tired of writing music that was formulaic and music that was simple and sounded like all of the other early classical music. He wanted to start doing things a little bit differently. And that's, I think, where his best music comes from, is his kind of pushing the boundaries and moving into this new and original style. But he lost a lot of his popularity at that time. The Viennese audience just didn't appreciate his newer music, his later music. It was too complicated. It was too dissonant. The content of his operas became too dark and moody and borderline obscene and inappropriate, and the Viennese culture had a certain amount of decorum to them that they were not going to accept that kind of material. But it was still popular throughout other places in Europe, especially Prague. His later operas were very popular in Prague. But he did start to get sick in his mid-30s. He had lost a lot of his popularity. He was kind of alone and had entered sort of a dark place mentally. He felt like he had a hard time living on his own, and started to kind of resent his father for the childhood that he had. And he started to really lose a lot of friends. He kind of squandered away all of his money early on, so he ended up dying broke. But in the last year of his death, he was commissioned a piece by this anonymous, mysterious patron who asked him to write a requiem. So he began working on this requiem, and as he got sicker and sicker, he was convinced that the anonymous patron was basically like death warning him that his time was coming and that he was writing his own requiem. And it kind of ended up turning out to be his own requiem in the end. Now, we did later find out that the person that commissioned it was actually the servant of a nobleman, and that nobleman wanted to basically steal the work and present it as his own music. But that story didn't come out until much later on. Mozart ended up dying before he finished the Requiem, and one of his students finished it, and it has become a pretty popular piece. But he did die in kind of a pauper's death. He didn't have any there wasn't any ceremony or anything major about Mozart dying. It wasn't really until later on that people began to recognize again what an enormous talent Mozart really had been. So although even people like Haydn especially said that Mozart was the best composer that he had ever known, that he was just a phenomenal talent, and his music should be recognized. It wasn't until later on that his music began to be celebrated the way that it is today. He did write a lot of music in just 35 years, although in that 35 years, most composers start writing their serious music in their 20s. Mozart started writing his serious music in his early teens, so a lot of his music was written over the course of about 15 or 20 years, even though he only lived to be 35 years old. He did write in all classical genres. He wrote some great symphonies, some great string quartets, some operas, some serenades, divertimentos, things like that are very, very, very popular. Before we listen to some of his music, I do want to show a clip from, there was a movie that came out in the 90s called Amadeus, and some of you may have seen this movie. It's a great movie that is loosely based on Mozart. It's kind of a historical fiction based on this rivalry between Salieri and Mozart. And this clip is an example is a clip from that movie, and it's a scene where Mozart meets the emperor for the first time, and he also meets Salieri for the first time, and that's really where their rivalry kind of begins. What I love about this is not necessarily the historical context here, but what I love about this, and the reason I'm showing it, is because we see some of Mozart's personality. We see kind of his immaturity and his inability to deal with people on a polite and mature way, and some of the kind of feathers that he ruffles along the way. It's not that he's a bad person or intentionally trying to be rude or anything during this scene, but he comes across that way because he is just so arrogant and always thinks, what he can do is probably better. And it's not that he's trying to be ugly about it. He just is. So the scene before this, he's introduced to the emperor. This guy, Salieri, had commissioned or had written a piece to welcome Mozart and taught it to the emperor, who had been taking piano lessons, and the emperor plays it for him as he comes in. And then, and somebody cooked some popcorn down the hall, didn't they? Anyway, now I'm hungry. So this is kind of Mozart's reaction to that. So just pay attention to his personality. That's really the part that matters in this clip here.
Do you know, actually compose some variations on a melody of yours.
Oh, really? Which one?
Mio caro Adonne.
Well, I'm flattered.
A funny little tune, but it yielded some good things.
And now he has returned the compliment. Herr Salieri composed this little march of welcome for you.
Really? Oh, grazie, signore. Sono commosso.
Well, there it is. Now, down to business. Young man, we're going to commission an opera from him. What do you say?
Majesty.
Did we vote in the end for German or Italian?
Well, actually, sire, if you remember, we did finally incline to Italian.
Did we?
I don't think it was really decided, Your Majesty.
Oh, German. German, please. Let it be German.
Why so?
Because I've already found the most wonderful libretto.
Oh, have I seen it?
I don't think you have, Herr Director. Not yet. I mean, it's quite new. I'll show it to you immediately, of course.
I think you'd better.
Well, tell us about it. Tell us the story.
Well, it's quite amusing, Majesty. It's set. The whole thing is set in
Yes. Where?
in a harem, Majesty. In a seraglio.
You mean in Turkey?
Yes, exactly.
Then why especially does it have to be in German?
Well, it doesn't especially. It could be in Turkish if you really want.
No, my dear fellow, the language is not finally the point. Do you really think that subject is quite appropriate for a national theater?
Why not? It's charming. I mean, I won't actually show concubines exposing their. It's not indecent. It's highly moral, Majesty. It's full of proper German virtues.
Excuse me, Majesty, but what do you think these could be? Being a foreigner, I would love to learn.
Well, tell him, Mozart. Name us a German virtue.
Love, sire.
Oh, love! Well, of course, in Italy we know nothing about love.
No, I don't think you do. I mean, watching Italian opera. All those male sopranos screeching, stupid fat couples rolling their eyes about. That's not love, it's just rubbish. Majesty, you choose the language. It will be my task to set it to the finest music ever offered a monarch.
Oh, there it is. Let it be German. Oh. This is yours.
Keep it, Majesty, if you want. It's already here in my head.
What? On one hearing only?
I think so, sire. Yes.
Show us.
The rest is just the same, isn't it? It doesn't really work, does it? Did you try? Shouldn't it be a bit more? Or this? This? Yes. Better? What do you think?
So that gives you a little bit of a taste of Mozart's personality and why he didn't always get along very well in the aristocracy. He just had a little bit of an interesting and obscene way of doing things. Okay, so speaking of interesting and obscene, we're going to take a listen to one of his later operas, Don Giovanni, which was commissioned for a Prague opera and became hugely popular in Prague, although it was not well received in Vienna because of the content of the opera itself. So this is based on the Spanish story of Don Juan, who is notably if you're not familiar with the Don Juan story, he's basically somebody that goes around seducing women and a lot of times stealing from them, winning over their dowries and stealing their dowries. Yes?
Is that like a Spanish version of the Telepresque?
I'm not sure. Maybe. I'd have to look that up, though. I'm not as culturally familiar with that.
It's Russian.
It's kind of a Russian version of the same thing, probably. I'm not sure. But so this is kind of an Italian twist on that story, Don Giovanni. It is Italian. It's an Italian opera, although it was written by a German to be premiered in Prague. But the story is told primarily by Leporello, who is a servant of Don Giovanni, and basically what we see at the beginning is that Leporello sees his master attempt to rape a young woman, and whenever a policeman comes to intervene, he ends up killing the policeman. Turns out that policeman is the young woman's father, and basically the woman and her fiance spend the rest of the movie trying to catch this Don Giovanni and figure out who he was, and Leporello kind of decides that he's going to try to follow Don Giovanni and see what happens, and try to stop him, or at least learn enough about him to stop him. Leporello is kind of a comic little servant character. So I've got one pulled up. There's a movie version of this that's pretty good, and I'm going to try to watch the opening scene from that. If that doesn't work, I'll pull the one from the textbook. I was having trouble getting the internet to work properly today.
Montiana,
Okay. You can watch more of that on your own if you're interested. And then I want to close today with Mozart's Piano Concerto number 23 in A major, which was written about 1786. And this is one of Mozart's personal favorite compositions. This is in sonata form. The first movement, at least, that we're going to listen to is in sonata form. And you hear the orchestra and the piano kind of going back and forth. You'll actually hear on this that the orchestra starts, and it takes a little bit before the piano comes in. So that is Mozart for you. We will continue on Wednesday with Beethoven, and then Friday, of course, you'll have your exam. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday.